The gospel reading this morning comes from the gospel according to Mark. Bartimaeus comes to Jesus with faith, asking that he might see again, recognizing Jesus' identity. Bartimaeus is the first person to call him son of David in the Gospel of Mark. A reading from the Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." They called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. This is the gospel of our Lord. Jesus and his disciples go to Jericho, and they leave. We don't know what happened in Jericho. For the purposes of our story, it isn't important for the purposes of the gospel. We aren't told. Except we're told that Jesus and the disciples go into Jericho, and Jesus, the disciples, and a large crowd go out of Jericho. What happened? Why the large crowd? Did they want to follow after Jesus? Were they making sure that he left? We don't know. We only know that there was a large crowd when they left Jericho. And as they're leaving, there's Bartimaeus shouting, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Doesn't he know how to act? Doesn't he know just because you know who the famous person is, or the celebrity, or the public figure, you don't shout out at him? That's not how we do. That's rude. Didn't your parents raise you better than that? And yet, watch the crowd of reporters around any political figure, right? Watch the paparazzi. Watch the screaming fans. And then again, you can probably look around your own family if you're like me. There's that family member who doesn't always follow the social conventions. They talk a little louder than they should. They talk about things you don't talk about in polite company. And I realize that maybe one or two of you might be that person in your family. We won't judge. Martin Luther King was sitting in a jail in Birmingham. He had been protesting. He was arrested. He had been out trying to raise help for the cause. He was trying to get folks engaged. Many of the folks he talked to, many of the other public voices at the time said, "We agree with the cause, but not the tactics. Couldn't he wait? Couldn't he be less aggressive? Couldn't he just quiet down?" King writes from that jail cell and tells them that he hears them, but if not, wait. Like Bartimaeus, when asked to be quiet, he shouts all the louder, even if there are words written on a piece of paper. There are a lot of forces that seek to silence those like Bartimaeus. Those who want to keep the status quo, as well as those who like those social conventions, sure want to quiet Bartimaeus down. It's awkward when someone acts out. Today we arrest folks like Bartimaeus for disturbing the peace. We lock them up. Make no mistake about that. Today, Bartimaeus would be detained by law enforcement. We have included in the bulletin this week a note about Jan Hus, who was burned at the stake. One more person who proves that when you shout out in the street for change, those in power will destroy you if they can. Although there were those like Huss and Wycliffe and Erasmus who were seeking to reform the church, it was when Martin Luther nailed those 95 theses to a church door in Wittenberg that we say the Reformation started. We place it on Luther's shoulders. And Calvin was doing work at the same time, and so was Zwingli and others. But we say it was Martin Luther who started the Reformation. And here we are, just a couple years before the quincentennial of the Reformation. 500 years of Reformation. Now, the Reformation is an event, and Luther is a cycle. An event, as many a French philosopher has told us, is something that happens but cannot be contained. An event occurs, it breaks forth, it can't be quantified, and we can't even say what caused it. You should take note that there has never been one form of Christianity. Just as there's never been one form of an American citizen or one form of anything else. There are Democrats and Republicans. There are Baptists and Presbyterians. There are always different kinds. There have always been Christianities. So all claims to totality hide a multiplicity that is simultaneously an excess and a void. An event happens when the excluded appears on the social scene, suddenly and drastically. It ruptures the appearance of normality and opens a space to rethink reality from the standpoint of its real basis in an inconsistent multiplicity. An event breaks into the mundane reality of human life and fundamentally disrupts it. An event names a fabulous event that is itself grace. A pure givenness that produces a militant collective characterized by fidelity to the event, love, and confident hope. Now, Huss sought to make some reforms, to disrupt the state of the situation, the order of being, and he was burned. When Luther called upon the princes to stand against the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope, they did. The impossible happens. And it happens and disappears, and we look back and say, well, that was the Reformation. We mean what happened then changed the world, even if as it was happening, they couldn't quite see that. Because at the time it was happening and disappearing. This is what we mean when we say that Reformation is an event. To say Luther is a cipher is to recognize that a person is not an event, but they can be similar. It's to recognize that Luther was significant for many of his contemporaries, but they never heard him preach. They never read a thing he wrote. They just knew there was this rebel over there. And he meant something. Even those today who would appropriate Luther, who would claim him for their own work, they've not read the Reformation starting from the dense text of a Luther, a Zwingli, or a Calvin, because they started with an event in which a figura appeared, a cipher that stands for what they identify themselves with, as well as a way of deciphering the signs of the times and places. They appealed to the Reformation and Luther to set themselves apart and to resist assimilation. I hope that makes sense. I hope what we say when we say the Reformation is an event and Luther is a cipher is understandable. If you want to talk more about events in French philosophy or ciphers, come by anytime. However, I realize this conversation may leave some of you empty. Let's see if we can say something more, something less. Let's begin with the fact that Reformation does not come easy. Like Bartimaeus, you have to overcome those forces of silence. That's not always easy to do. The pressure can be overwhelming. Even in the face of the event, the miraculous given, there is immense work that needs to be done. Our psalm this morning speaks of sowing with tears. It portrays a joy that comes only on the other side of great grief. And there it is in Jeremiah as well. He speaks of a great company of the remnant of Israel weeping as they return to Jerusalem. Radical change, real reformation does not come easy. If you want to be a part of it, you should not only imagine yourself crying, you should prepare yourself to weep. The weeping points to another truth, that reformation does not come cheap. Again, ask Jan Hus. Cost him his life. And there were others. When Zwingli and the Swiss were attacked by the Catholics, the Zurich army lost when Zwingli died in battle. Luther was hidden by the German state, grew a beard, went into hiding, so you could not recognize him, and there was war. Only the Peace of Nuremberg in 1532 prevented countless lives from dying in the emergence of Protestantism. Yes, those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Sometimes those spans generations. One generation weeps, while another generation reaps. Reformation does not come cheap. The last truth about Reformation that we are going to mention here is that Reformation is never done. There is a statement we get from the Latin, Ecclesia Reformata Semper Reformanda, which we translate, the church reformed, always reforming. We may have moments where we are able to reap the harvest with joy. We must continually go out sowing. That means there will be more tears. This, in fact, is part of why we say the Reformation is not cheap or easy. It is not something about which you can say, we did that, it's done. We are always doing, always reforming. Or we are not. The work is too hard. The cost is too much. It's just easier to slip in with the dominant ideology. You tell Bartimaeus to shut up. Now is not the time or place. You're tired of not fitting in and finding a moment to relax. Just be quiet, Bartimaeus. We don't want to stand down. You look at some of the promotional materials for the quincentennial of the Reformation. The ELCA talks of 500 years of God's grace in action. Ongoing action. Thing living and breathing. They're not talking about something that happened, but something that is happening. And they're not alone. Many people are talking this way, and they are right. It is ongoing. Semper Reformanda. It's also hype and spin. Sometimes the church has been living the Reformation. Sometimes it has been asleep. It has been a part of the dominant ideology of the day. The church has itself been that which needed the event of Reformation to rip open the fabric of being, the fabric of the social order. It was not the incarnation of the event, but it was that which needed the event over the last 500 years. Let me close with this. The philosopher Karl Popper contrasts total and piecemeal engineering in the social realm. As opposed to some people who want to tear everything down and start over, or make big changes, Popper talks about piecemeal changes. You change this, and all of our actions have secondary and tertiary things that we can't control. So you make the change, and you see what happens if you make other little changes, and that gets you where you go. Think about how we drive. Sure, you can make big changes as you're driving down the road, but nobody's going to want to ride with you. You'll probably get pulled over. We make little changes to keep us on course. Martin Luther posted an invitation to a debate on the church door. Back then it was like posting a blog or status on his Facebook or something on his Twitter account or even putting something up on a bulletin board. It was a small thing, but it became huge as the Spirit and grace opened it up and the Reformation became an event and Luther became a disciple. As we seek to be Semper Reformanda, we don't have to do big things. Make little changes. And grace will open these up in ways that we cannot imagine. We can do little things, like shouting out every once in a while, Jesus of Nazareth, have mercy on us. You can do little things like helping someone whose voice isn't being heard to be heard. Little things may be little, piecemeal, but they're not always easy nor cheap. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on your church. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on us.